Hello, folks. Well, the time has come once again. We have just ended our 4th trip. Can you believe we've done 4 trips? That's amazing. I don't know how many total locations we're up to right now at this moment, but we've probably been able to do a lot. For those of you who are recently tuned in and don't know what the heck I am talking about, every long-term trip of mine, I go and travel, and at the end of it, I shoot some sort of epilogue video, recapping the events that you may not have been able to see on those main location-based videos. In addition to that, I also talk a little bit about just my philosophy, things I've learned, lessons I've had to really come to terms with. So yeah, in an effort to be as transparent and open with the viewership as possible, I like to dedicate a whole video to describe all of those things, the off-camera events, the reflections I've had, and I try to do this to grow as a person. I am a person just like everyone else, and with that I try to learn a lot about myself through these travels. That was one of my main goals at the beginning, to really learn and develop as a person. Another thing I like to do on these epilogue videos is that I like to tease you all with a nice landscape of scenic nature, to tease you a little bit about future travels we go on. I don't know if this is the best representation of the region we're in now for this current travel, but I guess those trees might be the best indicator. So with all that being said, I welcome you to the 4th Coverage Project epilogue video. Now I will say this, if you haven't seen many of the last trip's travel videos, I really strongly urge you to watch a lot of those, because then you'll get a lot of context for the content I'm going to tell you all in this epilogue video. It may be confusing to you all if you don't really have that context and I'm just talking about details without really giving much of a background. So before you watch this video, if you have not already seen a good chunk of those videos from our march through the Midwest tour, please watch those first, then come back here, and we'll talk about everything that needs to be talked about. So now that we are here in this nice, tranquil, peaceful setting, I guess it's time to really recap what the march through the Midwest was all about. So, I set off west from New York State. We went to Jamestown, but then we really had to go and enter the Midwest. The next few days were filled with Erie, Pennsylvania, then Presque Isle, and after a few days we finally entered the true territorial Midwest with the new state of Ohio. And Ohio was a wondrous state. Cuyahoga Valley National Park, Cleveland, Ohio, Toledo, Ohio. Then we went north into the state of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and Lansing. Then we went down a bit, explored the very top of Indiana. We saw another national park, Indiana Dunes. Then quickly as ever, we entered the Prairie State, Illinois, what people may consider to be the true heart of the Midwest. And we avoided Chicago, because people have seen enough of Chicago. We went to Peoria, Illinois, in the center of the state. Then Bloomington, a little eastward. Then we went down into the capital, Springfield. And then we entered yet another state, Missouri. As you can tell, this trip was very, very long, a full 3.5 weeks. And I guess Missouri was sort of that halfway point in terms of distance, but by then I was already like 2 weeks in. So we visited St. Louis, Missouri. Unfortunately, I couldn't really go much into the interior of Missouri because that would have been too long of a trip for me. So we went back eastward, but we didn't go the way we came. We went through the southern part of these states. We then arrived in the southern part of Indiana, a place called New Harmony, a very interesting place, and then went a little more eastward to a town called Corydon. And believe me, that was a funny video. I loved shooting that video. That was great. Believe it or not, I took a full day off just to drive to the next part, just a full-on driving day. We ended up in a familiar state of ours, but we went to a new region of West Virginia. A region of West Virginia more associated with the Midwest than Appalachia country. We went to Wheeling, West Virginia. And then, what I consider the highlight of the trip at the very end, near the very end, but we went to this amazing cultural oddity in the US. You wouldn't normally expect, if I were to explain it correctly, like this monastery type of dwelling community, this isolated community called New Vrindaban. And I was so thrilled about my experience, I had to come back. So originally, the final stop was going to be Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a city more associated with the Midwest than the East Coast cities of Philadelphia and Allentown and Scranton. It was almost like its own little region of the country. But if I'd have to associate it with a larger region, it would definitely be more Midwestern. But after Pittsburgh, that would have been the end. But we went back to New Vrindaban to have this Ratha Yatra festival. And we paraded in the streets of Wheeling, West Virginia with this community of Hare Krishnas. So overall, 3.5 weeks in the Midwest, and it was totally an experience I do not regret going. The Midwest is such an underrated region of the country, and I'm glad we all took a visit for some time and saw all the wondrous places that are there waiting to be explored. Just the idea that it's taken me several minutes just to recap this wonderful grand adventure we had should tell you a thing or two about how I enjoyed this march through the Midwest. But needless to say, I didn't just go about having fun without learning a thing or two. If you listen to the last epilogue, you would know I try to learn things about myself and just about life in general. So I definitely learned a thing or two from this march through the Midwest. If you think for a bit about what the Midwest is and the role it played culturally in the development of the United States then and now, it encompasses a lot of things. I mean, we explored 5 new states: Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, and Missouri, alongside visiting some other new regions of familiar states. The Midwest essentially acts as this transition area between the old colonial East and the frontier lands of the West. And so, of course, as I said before, the Midwest holds a lot of these places that would serve as catalysts for these things I learned, these new experiences I had, and lessons I take with me to this day. And the main theme, the main lesson I want to bring forth to you all today for this video is that sometimes when traveling on these long adventures, we want to have everything in order. And especially me, I can say that for myself. I really like to have a straight idea of what's going on. I like to have this control over whether it's fate or day-to-day itineraries. I like to have this control because it gives you a sense of security. And sometimes it's not the best thing to have your mind so warped around this idea of control that you need to control how your trip goes in order to be satisfied with it. So sometimes it's best to relieve yourself of that sense of control. Sometimes it's best to just let go with the flow, and just accept what happens on your journeys. And I know not everybody's traveling. You all most likely have your day-to-day lives, so this can also apply to your day-to-day lives. A lot of times we want control over the job we have, or the friends we meet, or just anything in life. We like that sense of control because it makes us feel like we're empowered and we have this sense of security within our life. But sometimes, and this is the lesson that I want to bring forth to you all, sometimes it's just best to let go and accept what life brings forth to you. So how and why did I learn this big important lesson on our march through the Midwest? Well, it being a 3.5 week journey, let's just say along the way that there were many experiences and circumstances brought upon me that really tested a lot of qualities I had as a person, whether it was testing my patience, frustrating me, or deterring me from what I wanted to get done. So there were a lot of things that happened. And when I'm traveling, I am the type of person who really likes to have a plan set in motion, from day-to-day itineraries to I guess, a monetary budget of how much I want to spend per day. I really like to have everything in order so I know what's going on and I can plan accordingly. And through that is what sort of gives me the sense of satisfaction that I'm blossoming into adulthood with this sense of independence from all the planning I do. But life isn't so simple. Life doesn't just give everything one once. Life tends to challenge people, and during this trip, challenged I was. There were many experiences that I had. I guess to start off, I could talk about the idea of when I'm filming, I like to have these good open shots. Whether it's a landscape shot or a shot of me talking, I want all the scenes in the video to be perfect, just right. That's a bit selfish of me because I can't expect that everything's just gonna go right. I mean, I'm being a tourist just like everybody else is being a tourist. And so while I'm shooting my videos, other people, they're going to take their 10 pictures for Instagram. They're going to strike their many poses for minutes at a time. And so one example that really tested a lot of my patience was when in Ohio, in Cleveland, we just arrived at that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it's a world-renowned landmark. And so I wanted to get the best shot I could of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame sign. Unfortunately, though, everybody else wanted that too. And so I was waiting there for like 20 minutes, just waiting for everybody to scatter and disperse. But you can't when people are coming in, people are coming out of the museum building, and they want that perfect picture, just like I did. So it was almost an impossible feat to get that perfect, nobody in view shot of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame sign. I tried to salvage the time I did have and just take the best photo I could, but that was an instance that really frustrated me. I wanted perfection, but sometimes it's impossible to attain perfection. And that's only but the first example of how we want control. I wanted control of the scenario, and it just doesn't happen like that. Additionally, in Cleveland, I wanted to try some new local food that I haven't had before. There's something called a Polish boy, and there was only really one place that I could legitimately get one of these local Cleveland Polish boys, and that was a food truck. The problem with food trucks I've noticed is that they only come on certain days, they're only there for a few hours, so I had to time it just right. I did a lot of research online and tried to figure out when they were open so I could go to Cleveland at the perfect time to get myself one of those tasty Polish boys. Just so happened that I went to the exact location there on the days that they're open, and they weren't there. I looked for blocks and blocks and blocks, and I couldn't find that darn food truck. I was also hungry, so that frustrated me a little bit. But another example, I wanted to have another element in the video to be just right, to have a good tasting meal. You can't have control over those things. Some things you just gotta rely on luck or fate or something. So from what I can say, believe me, what goes into the making of a coverage project video isn't just showing up at a location and just walking around. It is a lot of planning, research for both what you want to see, what you want to show on the camera, and what you talk about. A lot of research goes into making things just right for the video. When I came to the middle of Michigan, I was a week and a half in on my trip and I was running out of clean clothes, so I had to find some place to get laundry done. The campground promised me that they had washing machines and dryers. They had dryers, no washing machines, so I was left to find some washing machine, find some laundromat in the area. Day after day, as I was at that campground, they said, oh yeah, we're bringing it in the next morning, the next day. They never did that. So sometimes you can't rely on other people, you just have to figure out alternative contingency plans on your own. When I went to this laundromat in Michigan, it did the job, but not very well. Clothes were still as dirty as they were from all the adventuring we were doing, both in the natural and urban places we went. So that was really frustrating. You spend $3.50 for washing and $3.50 for drying, and nothing. It's almost like you wasted $7, just like that. Another example, you have plans in motion, they don't work as well as you want them to. As I was driving to Central Illinois, I had to drive through Chicago, and Chicago traffic is the worst, and that traffic made me about 2.5 hours late to the campground I wanted to visit, and thus 2.5 hours late on the schedule, because I really make sure that the time I use during a day is of the most productivity. Another thing you want not to happen, you want it to be within your control, it's not. Traffic, just a great example of things you can't control. So the point I want to get to is that with all these things going not the way I wanted, I was getting pretty bummed with my trip. I was having fun at the moment, but there were so many things deterring me from getting things done the exact way I wanted, and that was sort of bringing me down. Oh, now look at this lake. Quite a calm and peaceful lake. Gee, I wonder where we are. So at that point, if I wanted my trip to be a little more satisfying, I knew I couldn't rely on other factors externally. I had to change my own mindset. I couldn't micromanage things as best I could anymore. I just had to be of the mindset that whatever happens, happens. I'll figure whatever out, and I'll just accept the way things go. And oh my, did that change my entire perspective on that trip. I think just in general, it doesn't have to be about traveling. It could be just about anything in daily life. The idea that people have to control things and they want everything under their grip. It really changes the lens of how one sees the world. As I started to just drop any sense of, I need this control, I saw those experiences from a completely different lens. It almost was like things became much more peaceful. I was going from town to city to natural attraction with this sense of peace. Like I didn't need anything to be done. And if things happened to go the way I didn't want, well, whatever. I'll go to the next place and maybe that will be a little bit better. Instead of thinking of all the ways things could go bad, I just was thinking, wow, how lucky am I to continue being able to travel. Look at all these good experiences I'm having, regardless of the minuscule things that actually do happen, whether it's talking to people or just circumstances that don't go your way. Who cares? I'm having an adventure, and with that comes good and bad. So before I get to the long-anticipated end of this trip, I really want to talk about the campground experiences I had. Here in the Midwest, people are so friendly. It's unlike I've really experienced outside of maybe the South. Like, people are just naturally amicable. They're willing to have a conversation with you, chat it up, and even cook you lots of things too. Oh, that's a nice seat. Might as well take a seat on the seat. But yeah, people are really friendly in the Midwest. All over I went, people were just happy to see that another person was at the campground or someone to talk to along the street. When I was in Erie, Pennsylvania, Presque Isle, northeastern Ohio, the campground I was at, I was very lucky to be situated at the site because there was a family from Erie, Pennsylvania, along with like a family friend or so, who was camping there for the weekend. On the last day before they left, they invited me over for like a little cookout. They were making these homemade chicken wings on the fire, and they were just so hospitable. They were just happy to have someone else over for genuine, authentic conversations. And things like that are just invaluable when you travel, as I've said before in time. One of those days I spent at the campground was sort of a break day in between videos. Believe it or not, there is a really big draw with all these different attractions they have on the weekends. So I participated in this sort of cornhole tournament. Didn't do well at all. No, I didn't do well at all. But, ooh, this is a shaky bridge, if you can call it one. But yeah, participated in the cornhole tournament, let another guy down because we were in teams, and oh, yeah, I let him down big time. But that doesn't matter. I was having fun, and that's the whole campground spirit. You just do what you want to do. And additionally, when I was in central to southern Illinois, in between the Springfield video and the St. Louis video, I was lucky enough to be situated at that campground next to some great people. They were, I think, 2 couples getting on in age, and they were so friendly. It's just like that Midwest hospitality. Of course, they not only invited me over for conversations in the evening, but they also cooked breakfast, not once, but twice for me. They offered me coffee, and it was almost like our house is your house, that type of mentality. And finally, there was that Eastern Ohio campground. Oh my goodness, these people were amazingly friendly. This one guy, he showed me all around his trailer, and he had a nice dog who was jumping out. They were both really friendly. He made me a walking stick, which I might allude to later. You'll definitely see what that stick is. Like, he took a branch off from a tree, or that was just out anywhere on the ground. He whittled off the bark, and he also used like this electric saw to cut ridges into it to sort of act as like a grip or a handle. That was mighty cool, and I'm probably gonna have that stick, even though it's just a stick, but the gesture of him making that for me, that's what I value, and I'm probably gonna keep that for a long time. Whether these travels end or not, or whatever, that stick is mighty cool. So here's the part of the video where I get to the much anticipated end of the Midwest trip. I arrived in New Vrindaban, not knowing a thing about the area, and the most I really knew about was online research. I expected the people to be friendly, but not as hospitable as they were. They were hospitable. I arrived on a Thursday, intending to just go to Pittsburgh the next day and go home on that Saturday. But through that day I spent in New Vrindaban, West Virginia, I was introduced to many different people. So, Marari Gupta Das, and Sati, and Hugo, and Shiva. If you ever get a hold of this video, ever in time, thank you so much for making that last weekend just so remarkable. I deeply appreciate it. Every day in New Vrindaban, they have breakfast and lunch served for anybody who comes by for free. I originally asked, hey, do I have to pay for this? They said, no, we do it by the grace of our own hearts and for Krishna. Watch the New Vrindaban videos if you have no idea what I'm talking about. That is probably a very important video to watch in that Midwest trip. So there was one guy, he just said, hey, do you want to explore the inside of that temple? And I was like, oh, sure, might as well. The fact that he would just go out of his way to ask people to go into this temple, which may or may not have been closed off on certain points, really stands out to me, because I was just this random person who came along into their camp. By the grace of their own generosity, they made such an experience, such an impact on my experience there. They have these things called kirtans, where for basically hours at a time, they will sing to Krishna. They will sing and dance early in the morning to late at night. All throughout the day, they will have all these different ceremonies and rituals, which I was just so amazed by. I love learning about the traditional cultures of different belief systems, and it's remarkable to see those things with your own eyes. You wouldn't really expect that to be happening in rural West Virginia, you know? The idea that I came on the very weekend that they had this major festival, Ratha Yatra festival. Still, even in my head, it's hard to pronounce these things, but yet they had this major festival that only happened once a year, and I was there on that weekend almost. So instead of just going home on that Saturday, I just went back to New Vrindaban that Friday afternoon and spent the entire weekend there. I did not have to pay a single cent for anything that weekend. You know, aside from like the shops and things at festivals that were there, anything that really needed immediate accommodation, such as housing, food, showers, completely taken care of, because these people were just so generous and so homely. For a place like New Vrindaban, I feel like my journey there is not complete. I need to go back there at least once more. It's just, you can't even stay a weekend without knowing everything that is going on in that community. It really takes at least a week or two to really immerse yourself in their beliefs and their traditions. So to tie that whole march through the Midwest trip together under a central theme of let go of trying to control things, I would say that in my effort to just let go of things, the last part of that trip, I don't know how fate works, but it seemed like as soon as I clicked off the switch to let go of control, things just started to happen that were good. Maybe it was my mindset, maybe things actually just went lucky for me. I would say, please, if you want to do well at something, if you want to make the most out of your experiences in life, it's good to plan a little. I think without planning, these things like trips and travel just go down the drain because you have no idea what to do. So planning is important in a way, but overly planning, trying to micromanage things, it's not so healthy. It only does yourself more harm than good. Like, I do understand that element where it's like, oh, if things go wrong, at least I can plan ahead for when those things go wrong, but overall, it doesn't really do yourself much good. It only lessens the happiness and joy you have on these trips. And it goes back to that central theme in a lot of philosophy and humanities, where humans throughout time have always wanted to have a grasp on what goes on, but ultimately we can't. We have no control over what happens in life, our fate, our future. We can only control our mindset about how to approach good and bad. So that's my reflection for the entire march through the Midwest trip. I really hope you enjoyed this series of epilogues so far, and I hope you also enjoyed this latest epilogue through our march through the Midwest tour. It was a long video, but I think for a long trip, it deserves a lot of content. As something to say before you see those next series of videos for the next trip we go on. I will have around actually the same amount of content, but in less time. I'm figuring out how to be more productive with my days, taking less break days off, and still feeling like I'm not wasting any time. I say this every epilogue, but I think it's also just important to keep reiterating this. I want to separate myself from other travel vlogs. I really want to be more of a transparent figure when I'm making these videos. Being less of a YouTuber and more of an actual person. Someone who wants to learn about themselves, someone who wants to learn about world cultures, and just be like every one of you who are watching this video. You're tuning into this channel to learn something about cultures around America, or learn about how people work or what history is. And I have the same exact enthusiasm about that. That is why I'm traveling. I'm not traveling for a vacation. I'm traveling to learn. I hope that these epilogues can shed a little bit of light into my own personal philosophies and reflections and show you the real reason why I'm doing this whole coverage project thing. So yeah, that's the whole video. Well, with that said, some distance away from that mysterious lake somewhere in America, more travels to come. I will see you at the next location.